Well, folks, it's that time of the month again, another episode of Mondays with Mundy, and that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union Legacy Foundation. And if you watched the last two episodes, you know we've been visiting Newport, Rhode Island, because that is where a number of Union League members built houses or cottages. And it's also where some Union League members who are architects designed those houses or cottages for those League members. So part three will be the last part. And we're going to focus on three houses, one of which was purposely built for a League member by a League member, and the other two were houses that were purchased by League members. Actually, one of which was purchased by a League member, but the other one was then altered by a League member architect. I think I got that right. All right, so that's the story today. And as I said, this will be the third and last episode for Newport. Maybe we'll come back to it in a year. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen, which is what I always try and do. And did I get this right? Come on, slideshow from the beginning. Gosh, I'm still amazed when that thing works. All right, so here we go, part three, the end. And the first house is one called Stony Brook. Now, technically, it's not in Newport. It's on Aquidneck Island, which it turns out is divided into three different sections. The very southernmost is Newport. In the middle is Smithtown, and then on the top is Portsmouth. So let's go to the middle section, if you would. And this is a house that was built for the happy couple we've run across in the past a few times, Edward and Marie Louise Knight. Now, this is Edward Collins Knight Jr., whose father was a founding member of the League, multi-millionaire, made his money beginning with the Cuban molasses trade, but who also had a patent for the first railroad sleeping car to be made in America in the 1850s. And he would then sell that patent to none other than George Pullman, who turned it into an incredible industry in itself. Edward Collins Knight Jr., though, had the reputation for having more talent to spend his father's money than to make his own. We've hit on that before. And his wife, Marie Louise, had a reputation for being a little crazy. Horace Trumbull built their first house for them at 1629 Locust Street. And apparently Mrs. Knight would go outdoors brandishing a pistol and start shooting up and down the street. So that was the signal for all the families who lived there to get their children and their pets inside because they were all in great danger. So those are the Knights. Must have been incredible to be friends with theirs. And this is their first house, designed by Horace Trumbull, completely 100% by Trumbull, 1629 Locust Street. And to the right of it is the parish house for St. Mark's on Locust. So that is their first house, neoclassical French revival, right? And I've been in it a few times and it is remarkable, especially for a house so small. It's amazing how big it looks. This was their second house. This one is in Newport. This was Clarendon Court, named after Knight's first wife, because Marie Louise was the second. Her name was Clara Dwight Knight and Clara Den Hall. So Locust Street was 1902. This is 1904. So very quickly after the Center City house is finished, they're moving to Newport. We've come for that. What's left of the Gilded Age social scene. All right. And we heard about this one in the very first episode. And that brings us to, now that's Aquidneck Island, all right, in the middle with that red stripe. And that is the section where Stony Brook was built. And you can see that little peninsula, kind of like the little boot of Italy, and if you will, and towards the lower right corner of the island. And just above that is the location of Stony Brook. Now, what makes it different in some respects is that it was originally built on 75 acres, whereas most Newport cottages might have been as many as 20 or something like that at the most. Rough Point might be one of the larger ones. We'll get to that at the end. But this made Stony Brook just the largest estate on Aquidneck Island. And it was simply built as a summer home for the Knights. Okay. Now, the date of the house is 1927, 28, maybe 29. And in this diagram, you can see it at the bottom, number 501. That is the original house itself. And the other houses are all outbuildings, like a gardener's cottage, the carriage house, and the guest house, and things like that. So, and you can see it's on the Seconic River, which empties into the ocean. And this is the Indian Avenue view of the house itself. It was designed in what's called the Anglo-Norman medieval revival style. So take your pick. But what makes it, I think, interesting is that it's relatively small in scale compared to other Newport houses, but it still has a uniform feel to it. It still has this wonderful visual appeal, even with that darker stone, the colored stone that was from a local quarry. That just makes it, I think, very pleasing. And the fact that it's an overwhelmingly large area. You can see the second floor is all dormers, basically. This is the ocean side, or the Seconic Riverside, the ocean side. And again, you can see it's a big building still, but not as big as the other ones, though. And again, I just love the way the dormers and the gables alternate around the interior, the landscape there. Good stuff. All right. And this, you can see it is not symmetrical. It's basically a T, and this is the part that juts out, or if you will, and it does look like medieval, doesn't it? But it's a beautifully designed building. I mean, it's just, and again, scale, proportion, and appearance. Classic Trumbauer hallmarks. All right. This is the interior. This is the entrance hall. Now, at one point, the wood would have been, in keeping with medieval interiors. It would not have been painted. They didn't have paint to do that with back then. But in various revivals on the interior, redecorating, one of which is colonial, they've been painted white. You can see the Chippendale sofa there to give you some idea of what they're going stylistically. Here's another look at the hallway, but from the other direction, looking into the library. But again, you can see it's got a little bit of a neo-colonial feel to it. But again, all painted white with raised paneling. Dining room, but now you get an idea, though, of what it must have looked like originally when there was no paint, because look at the marbles in that fireplace. It's just spectacular, right? Even if the rest of the room doesn't quite match up to it. All right. And this is the library, which was not painted. So now you get some idea of what the house must have looked like originally with just the wood and the sconces. And it must have been really dark, but it's a medieval house, don't forget. And now we move to the carriage house. All right. And again, you can see same style, same building materials, same idea of dormered second floors and the gables. Really neat stuff. So it was originally, actually, it's always been a garage, if you will, but I think out of habit I call it a carriage house. But today it has been converted into a residence. So this is the gatehouse, right? And again, same style, same stone, same story about the dormer second roof. I love it. Only here you have ivy encroaching on the wall. This is the gardener's cottage. Of course, I mean, it just looks like a gardener would live there, doesn't it? Neat stuff. That's the beauty of Trumbauer's architecture. And here we have the second house. Let me go back and just one more time. I want to do nope, that. I mean, this to me just gives you the idea of just how massive that house really was, even though it tends to look relatively small. Great stuff all the way around. All right, let's go back to our next house called Seaweed. And you have to love the name. Now, Seaweed is a colonial, it's actually, the house itself was built 1860, 1861 by a fellow named Henry Howard. And he had sold it by the 1870s and has gone through numerous owners until in the early 1900s, it was purchased by a Union League member named Thomas Dolan, whom we've talked about in a few episodes before. Dolan was, after the Wideners and maybe the Elkinses, one of the wealthiest men, and maybe ever night in Philadelphia. Started his fortune during the Civil War by making Union Army uniforms at his Keystone Knitting Mills, and eventually he would become the chairman of the board of the United Gas Improvement Company, which owned public utilities, railroads, water systems between the East Coast and the Mississippi Valley. It was huge, and so was Dolan's fortune. But he would die in 1914, so he didn't buy that. So really, it wasn't until about 1910 that he bought the house. So Trumbauer did a quick fixer-upper, if you will, on it, and this is the result. It sits on the southern point called Bailey's Beach. So if you look at the center of the map, you can see Bellevue Avenue going down the center. You can see the numbers 28, 26, 29, and go to the left of 29. You'll see the end of the cliff walk. That's where Seaweed is located, and it's not accessible. It's on a private drive, but I could stand almost on top of my car and photograph it. So this is Thomas Dolan, fascinating looking character. There's sometimes I joke that he looks like a Jesuit in some ways, like an Irish Jesuit, but anyway. So this is Seaweed up close. It is still privately owned today. I don't believe it's in the Dolan family any longer. So I think they now somewhere in Maine. So that was Seaweed. And here we have Rough Point. Now Rough Point was built for Frederick William Vanderbilt and his wife, Louise, 1887, 1892, designed by the Boston firm of Peabody and Stearns. And I'll give a prize to anybody who can let me know what the two Peabody and Stearns private mansions are in Philadelphia, and hence they're on Rittenhouse Square. So there's not much Peabody and Stearns in Philadelphia. We're not familiar with them as an architectural firm, but Rough Point. All right, again, a summer cottage, local rough-hewn stone. This is what it looked like originally when the Vanderbilts lived in there during the summer season, which was generally mid-July and August. And this is what it looks like today. And I purposely included this slide because on the far right-hand side, the part behind the scaffolding is an addition that was added by Horace Trumbauer. So let me go to, and as is the one on the far left-hand side as well. And as we all know, Trumbauer was a league member, even though the owners have never been league members. So that's what the addition on the right-hand side looks like. So Rough Point, built for the Vanderbilts, went through a few owners. By the early 1900s, it was being leased or rented as a summer cottage, and then in 1922 was purchased by James Buchanan Duke of Duke University fame, but more famously of American Tobacco Company fame. And he made an incredible fortune by controlling the American cigarette market. I think he manufactured 90% of all cigarettes at one point in time. So you can imagine how much money he was making. Built a townhouse in Manhattan, designed by Horace Trumbauer. He built a university in Durham, North Carolina, designed by the firm of Horace Trumbauer. It was Trumbauer's last commission. Trumbauer died while it was still under construction, and Julian Abel took over. And so James B. Duke hired Trumbauer to add two sections to it. So the one on the right is the first of the two Trumbauer additions. It basically housed a ballroom / music room on the first floor, and then bedrooms above. And here we can see where it's located. So again, lower right-hand corner, you can see it's at the very, very bottom of Bellevue Avenue, right? You can see Rough Point Mansion, and it sits, you can see how much land it controls that looks over, well, Rhode Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a spectacular site. It was the first place I visited when I went to the Newport Summer School. I did that on my own. And this is the floor plan. So left-hand side, top illustration. So you can see that basically the house is a rectangle. Then Trumbauer added these two sections: left-hand side, music room; right-hand side, service wing. All right, because as life would have it, James Duke would die just a few years after, in 1925, and eventually his daughter Doris Duke, his only child, who became known as the richest girl in America, would make this her first real summer house. But then she ended up in Hawaii and then Manhattan and basically abandoned it, and she disposed of its contents. But then in around 1959, 1960, she returned to Newport and pretty much stayed there the rest of her life until she died in 1993. And so therefore the Trumbauer additions are very much a part of Rough Point during her second visitation of the house, if you will. And here we have an aerial view. You can see how it's sited right there on the point, left-hand side. So you can see the two large gables in the center of the building. That's the Peabody and Stearns building. Left of that is the ballroom music room wing. And then on the right, at the angle to the main house, is the service wing. So that's Rough Point. And in 1968, Doris Duke created the Newport Restoration Society, really the first financially sound restoration preservation organization in Newport. I mean, because she financed it. Other ones didn't have that kind of money, but hers did. And so today it is now owned by Newport Restoration, and it's open to the public, and it is worth the visit. Of all the houses I think I went in, I think it's my second favorite one, but it's for a house that big, it is very comfortable to live in. So there you have it, folks. 3 more Newport houses either owned by, built for, and designed by Union League members. So I hope with all this, it's not too late to go to Newport or to go to Quinnipiac Island in general and see all of these places. I hope you do. It's worth the effort. And buy a good guidebook on Newport architecture, and you'll find all this stuff in there. So thank you for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will not tell you what the next episode is going to be, but it won't be on Newport. Okay, I promise, I guarantee. All right. So we're in early August now. I hope everybody is enjoying their summer and they have a good summer that's left to them. And we'll see you one more time in August. Okay. So thanks, everybody. We appreciate your support and your patronage, and have a happy August. Goodbye.